We're in the midst of a huge transformation where peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, and I'm a partnerships manager here at AllVoices, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Today, I'm excited to welcome our next guest onto the show, Zaina Orbai. She's the Chief People Officer at TheRealReal. Zaina, how's your day going?
It's going great. Excited to be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon to speak with us. I have a couple questions, but if you want to start off by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, be sure to include your pronouns. And I would love to know, when you were younger, how did you answer the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I'm the Chief People Officer at TheRealReal. I live here in Oakland in the Bay Area. My pronouns are she and her. And I wanted to be a professional dancer when I grew up. So dance was a big part of my life from before I learned to walk well into adulthood. And I studied lots of forms of dance, jazz, Indian classical, modern. I minored in dance. And so in many ways, it's shaped who I am. I think about the focus, discipline, creativity, and movement, which are all ingredients for learning. So it's shaped me to be a lifelong learner. And I'm the person, where you're in the car or anywhere, some music comes on, and I'll just start, dancing to the beat. So yeah, always grooving. But yeah, dance has been a big part of my life.
I love that. That's a really creative answer as well. And speaking of things that shape us, I always think it's interesting to talk about your journey to being a chief people officer and where you are today. How do you think your personal journey has really led you to the real?
Yeah, I've always been a values-driven individual. So my first jobs were in the nonprofit sector, and that's where my early leadership and management lessons came from, where you have to galvanize volunteers, right, who work for free or little to no money, and it taught me that leadership is really about inspiring through mission and purpose. And so at an early age, I said, okay, if I can go grow my leadership skills, then I can have an impact regardless of profession or function. And so at the time, I was in LA, and the retail industry had a pretty robust management training program for people recently out of college. And so I joined that, and I became one of the youngest promoted general managers. And that was one of the hardest jobs, but like the most rewarding when I look back. And it, it taught me that I love ownership. It taught me I love to drive change. It taught me I love driving results through others. And so in many ways, what I do today is influence organizations, right? And drive impact at the organization level. And I especially enjoy high growth companies because that's where I can play an active role in shaping, today and for the future. So when I look back, I think, a lot of what I'm doing today in my role is connected back to those early roots around nonprofit and building community.
I love that. And especially influencing change over this past year and for the future. I think a lot of these conversations we're talking about how HR and people teams in general just have such a large seat at the table. How have you really seen the HR people space change over your past, 15 plus years in the space?
It has dramatically changed. I'm assuming every HR person tells you that. When I joined, it was heavy compliance, and now it's all about employee experience, right? Compliance is table stakes. The workforce was mainly manual with some automation. Now it's digitization, AI, and thinking about how does AI, integrate with human beings and their work. From local resources to globalization, right? A team of two now can sit in very different parts of the world and innovate and build. And then really the last is, when you think about decision-making power, accountability, that was very central. And now it's very decentralized. And so that is a big shift as well of how organizations collaborate and move forward. So I think, feel like everything's changed, in terms of how we work, and the pace is just accelerating. So for HR organizations, the old model is totally obsolete. I had to, in many ways, unlearn the things I had learned early in my career to then be successful in today's world. And the new models are still in the works, right? We're still learning, we're still figuring it out. And so it's an exciting time to be in HR. I mean, a lot of ambiguity and unknown, but an exciting time to, define where it's going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of variables, and a lot of people are being agile and changing up their strategies. Switching to kind of the people strategy at TheRealReal, what has been kind of your biggest cultural change over this past year that you tried and it's either working or you tried and you're just like, we're gonna iterate on it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, when I think about culture change, three things come to mind. One is purpose. The second is community, and the third is safety. And so let me elaborate. So the first one, purpose, I think people are looking to feel connected to something bigger than themselves, right? And making sure that their work matters. Community, I think people are wanting to feel connected to others, peers, colleagues in a more meaningful way than maybe they have in the past, and this concept of belonging, right, in the workplace. And then third, with safety, just a safe space, both physical and psychological, right? And that's really about, do I feel like there is a place where I feel supported, where I can grow, where I can be my authentic self? And so, I don't know about you, Christina, but I feel like to everyone watching, I mean, if you just think about what shifted for you personally last year, you'll find a lot of those are resonating. And so, as people leaders, I feel like we have to acknowledge it and build that into our cultures going forward, right? It's no longer, the lines between personal and work are now blurred. And so those are, I think, important things that people are looking for in the workplace now.
Absolutely. I definitely resonate with those kind of three pillars, especially that third one around psychological safety and physical safety at work too. And we're all trying to build cultures where people do feel like they are included, they belong, that they can thrive at work. But even in the best culture, everyone's bringing in these different experiences with them. Maybe at their previous company or in other experiences, they weren't able to provide feedback or give their honest opinion because they were afraid of just like jeopardizing their job or where they sit in the organization. And whenever you're making these strategy changes, everybody has an opinion. How do you encourage employee listening and feedback at TheRealReal in terms of strategy, tools, and productivity?
Yeah, open and honest two-way communication was one of the biggest opportunities that came up in our engagement survey last year. And so when we dove deeper, we realized we needed additional channels beyond the traditional channels of go to your HR representative, go to your manager, ways where people could feel safe. And so we invested in AllVoices, which is a two-way anonymous feedback tool, and the response has been great. It's allowing us to bubble issues up faster, and no matter how big or small the problem, it's giving us perspective from multiple vantage points, right? Those traditional channels are still there. Now we have another channel, and so we're able to just get to the root of the problem more quickly and timely. And if anything, it's providing us real-time feedback rather than hearing about it after the fact or when it's too late. So it's been a great addition to the channels we already had.
Yeah, I mean, that's really important too in terms of building trust. There's no one way to give feedback. Everybody has their own preferred ways of doing so as well. And when we're talking about building trust, employee feedback, all of these changing strategies, I wanted to ask more granularly about the employee experience. And everybody seems to be talking about retention as well as we're shifting our models of work, how do you think about TheRealReal's employee retention strategy and a team member's journey throughout the organization?
Yeah, no, that is the hot topic. I'm sure you're seeing the same things. The great career migration? I like the career migration versus the career resignation.
Yeah, me too.
And the heart of that, in my opinion, is people are looking for just change in their career, right? And we are actually seeing that at the Real Real too, that our voluntary turnover is up. And the number one reason is better career opportunity or a career change. And so we are investing a lot of time, resources, and action into educating people on the career they can build at TRR. And so instead of having to leave, how can you extend your career? Can you focusing on internal promotions? What are the skills that you can learn in your role and grow into the next role? So we have put, for me, the retention strategy comes with showing people they have a career opportunity here, or they can build new skills at TR rather than having to leave to get those. And that goes beyond title and pay. I think it's in some ways, bringing back the discovery in people's career and kind of bringing that magic back.
Absolutely. And it is a two-way conversation as well with your manager and thinking about how you want to contribute to the organization as well and thinking about your professional development. And part of that journey and conversation is people managers. There's been a lot of conversations around effective leadership this year and how people have had to shift their models in that way too. If, say, someone is interested in being a people manager as their next step, it can be scary, especially if this is your first time. How do you really invest in people managers at TRR?
Yeah, with the people managers, I think people management is the most complex it's ever been, right? You have hybrid, you have remote, you have people that have joined the organization that you haven't met yet, and vice versa. You might be new to the organization, and we invested in developing some custom training modules just to meet people at this time and the need. And those are, training modules like navigating through change, listening to connect, then going back to some of the fundamentals, giving and receiving feedback. Really, how do we equip our managers to have more meaningful dialogue with their employees so they can get to a conversation that's productive, that's healthy, that's moving forward. And the other focus is also onboarding, right? We're finding that because we're a high growth company, it's so important that we're creating that connection early on. And there's a lot of studies out there that state that how someone's on board and how engaged they are, there's a deep correlation with how long they stay. And so those sort of first 30, 60, 90 days are so important. We're also investing a lot of effort there to revamp our onboarding programs to make sure that both people managers and employees feel connected and that employees can successfully integrate into the organization.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the first 30, 60, 90 days, similar to the candidate experience through every touch point, is really important of how someone experiences the company culture, the workplace environment, if they do feel connected to the folks on their team and cross-functionally as well. And when we're talking about connectedness, a lot of folks have also looked more deeply at their diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy and what that looks like for the future. How do you really prioritize DEI across all of your locations?
Yeah, we have several workforces, our retail stores, our authentication centers, corporate HQ, and then our luxury managers are all in the field getting secondhand consignment. So for us, it was really getting commitment at the top. And I know with DEI, there's a lot of good intent, but I've seen them stall when there's a lack of understanding or a lack of commitment. And so we invested a lot of time with the full executive team, including the CEO, on capacity building sessions, really debating on our commitment and how far we wanted to go. And so the roadmap we built was really a joint effort with the full executive team. In fact, our ongoing task force, half the executive team is on that. And so we have, representation from across different departments. And when we built it, we didn't build it in a silo with HR, just with representation and turnover data. We asked each executive, what can you contribute to the overall progress in DEI? And so we have now 4 pillars, which, one is around culture, which obviously a lot of that HR owns, career. But then we've got a pillar around commerce and community. And those are where we get cross-functional groups really playing an active role. The other thing we did to make sure that we were also held accountable as an executive team is we took our board compensation committee and have now repurposed and added DEI to the agenda. So every quarter, we now have to report as an executive team on the progress and update. And so I think when I think about prioritizing, it's really creating accountability up and down and across the organization for it to work. Because I think when you only have 1 or 2 groups thinking about it, it tends to not get as much momentum. So I feel good that we have every team represented, in our ongoing DEI work.
Yeah, and I like the language you used around having a DEI roadmap as well. It's kind of similar to a product or service, and you're operationalizing equity into the system, which is really important. There's buy-in from executives, and there's a lot of ownership and accountability with goals if you need to report on it as well when you meet. In your experience, what is really important to ensure that all employees at TRR really feel like they are part of the culture?
Yeah, it's creating a culture of belonging, trust, and safety, right? And going back to that psychological safety, there's 4 different stages of safety. 1, you feel welcome and included, which I think is, sort of the basics. Then a sense that safe space where you can learn and grow, right? Then there's a safe space of you can contribute and bring your voice. And then really the last is challenging the status quo, that you can bring your voice in a way that might be differing to the thought in the room. And so for us, it's how do we bring the whole organization, across these 4 stages. And I think we've got junior managers, new employees. And so this is like something you're always working on. And for me, people managers really are the conduit of culture, right? They are the folks that are in a position where they take the vision and they're able to bring it to reality with their employees. And so again, with the inclusive culture, we have invested a lot in our people manager layer, sessions that are 2 to 3 hours long, 4 or 5 modules to really build on their awareness, understanding, and then give them actual tools and practices that they can apply immediately coming out of those meetings. So it's not just what's unconscious bias, but how do I run an inclusive team meeting? How do I, tactfully bring more silent voices to the table? And so I think that has been really rewarding to see, and we've gotten a lot of great feedback.
Absolutely. I like the term culture conduits as well. You might not talk with the CEO or even chief people officer every day, but more so often than not, you're talking with your people managers or other managers on the team, and they do really impact company culture. And again, those tangible examples of how you can mitigate bias when you're conducting meetings, especially over Zoom. It's just so important. I do want to shift a little bit to your experience as just a leader in the space too. So my next question is not necessarily at TheRealReal, but just things you're seeing out into the universe. And when people are making these large changes and they're implementing new tactics, there's of course going to be mistakes, even with the best intentions, and that's okay. But what are some common mistakes you're seeing folks make either in their people strategy or just, what you're seeing in the news?
Yeah, I think as HR leaders, we always have a big agenda, and then we go to do it, and it was like, oh, here's a challenge, here's a bump. Oh, we got to bring this person along. So for me, it's all about buy-in, buy-in from the top, the CEO, buy-in across from your peers, buy-in in different parts of the organization, and that takes time. And I think sometimes people sort of get alignment up and down, but not across. And so for me, it's really about stakeholder management. How do you bring the whole organization along, from board, CEO, management to employees on the initiatives you want to drive? And are those the right ones for that time? And if anything, COVID has taught us some initiatives you had to double down quickly, right? Other ones you had to completely discard and say, okay, we're going to come back to that in 2 years because right now, something else has taken precedence. So to me, it's ruthless prioritization and buy-in from as many people, from all parts of the organization to make sure the agenda is successful.
Yeah, buy-in is really important. And also the reality is you cannot prioritize everything. You need to actually, number it, and make sure the time resources is dedicated to your specific goals. And again, being agile for when things come up and uncertainty is there as well. I guess the flip side of that question is when we're looking towards the future, is there anything that you think that people in leadership roles or just companies in general need to bake into their strategy for talent and people to be successful in the future as we're thinking about the future of work?
Yeah, we started to see this concept of employee choice, and it came about in benefits and comp, right? Like choose your way, pick your own way, and now it's sort of across the board. Fundamentally, outside of like remote and hybrid work, how you work, what you work on, where you work, when you work, right? And so it's going to be about customization, flexibility, and choice. And I think that's a difficult challenge that every organization, whether you're 100 people or 100,000, is how do we effectively operate organizations when people are looking for choice? So I think that's really the next trend that we have to tackle.
Yeah, there are a lot of choices out there. There are a lot of options that employees have, but also employers to make about the future too. When you're looking back at your career, I'm sure that you have a lot of them, but is there a proudest moment that comes to mind, whether it's at the Real Real or in another kind of role where you're in that moment of flow and just thinking that, this is something that I have worked really hard for and I'm excited to see the fruits of my labor?
Yeah, I just been very excited and I guess privileged and appreciative of the companies I've worked for, and that have been mission led and gone through just hyper growth. Right, Levi's retail was at the brink of just growing when I joined. Yelp, and now the Real Real. And for me, success is not only are you a healthy company financially and creating returns for your shareholders, but you're also bringing joy and something positive in the world to that community. And then also you're transforming people's lives through career opportunities. And so, both sort of the health of the company, the market and customer you serve, and then employees. And I'm a big believer that when done well in high growth companies, they can change people's lives. So I think I'm most proud of that when I look back on that.
Yes, we spend so much of our time at work as well and thinking through what you mentioned earlier in terms of purpose and what you want to contribute as well. I think that is so important. So I think in terms of community, product and service and employees, all these different stakeholders, people have a real chance to make a difference in many people's lives. Is there, I know I asked a bunch of different questions from your experience to the real strategy to just things you're seeing as a thought leader in the industry. Is there anything that I either didn't ask or 1 to 2 key takeaways that you want to share with our audience before we close out our conversation?
Yeah, culture change takes time. And so I know there's all this rapid change happening, but I'm a big believer it's a series and sequence of lots of little adjustments, like micro adjustments, then bring a sort of evolutionary change. And I think whether you're a seasoned people leader or aspiring to be an HR, it's not sort of the big idea that wins. It's actually the day-to-day discipline of nudging the organization in the right direction to then get there. And so, that's really how you make sustainable, lasting change.
Change truly does not happen overnight, but there are things that you can do tomorrow to make sure you're changing little things about your behavior, and they could be a big change in someone else's life as well in terms of impact. Zaina, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. And as a reminder for folks listening, AllVoices believes in the empowerment of everyone to speak up at a company, and we know it's a requirement for the company to succeed. Have a good rest of your afternoon, everyone.